They wrote the songs that played at every wedding, every funeral, every summer of every life that came after them. And then the music stopped. In this video, we visit the graves of musicians with tragic deaths. Patsy Cline died March 5, 1963, age 30. Buried at Shenandoah Memorial Park, Winchester, Virginia. Crazy and I Fall to Pieces, the voice that crossed country music into the pop charts and proved a woman from the Shenandoah Valley could out-sing anyone Nashville had. A small plane carrying her and 3 other performers, including Cowboy Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins, went down in a storm outside Camden, Tennessee, returning from a benefit concert. She had reportedly told friends in the weeks before that she did not expect to live much longer, a premonition repeated often enough afterward that it became part of the legend. 30 years old, the biggest female star in country music, the plane going down in weather that grounded every other flight that night. Otis Redding died December 10, 1967, age 26, buried at his ranch in Round Oak, Georgia. Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, recorded 3 days before his death and released a month after, became his only #1 single, a song about waiting for change he never lived to perform on television. A twin-engine plane carrying Redding and 4 members of the Bar-Kays crashed into Lake Monona in Madison, Wisconsin, in icy weather, only one band member surviving by clinging to a seat cushion. The song's whistled outro, recorded almost as an afterthought because Redding had not finished the final verse, became the most famous unfinished thought in soul music. The man about to cross into Teen Stream drowned in a Wisconsin lake stream before the song that would have done it was even released. Sam Cooke died December 11, 1964, age 33, buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Glendale, California. A Change Is Gonna Come, written after he was turned away from a whites-only motel in Louisiana, became an anthem of the civil rights movement. Released only after his death. Shot 3 times by the manager of a Los Angeles motel who claimed Cooke had attacked her. The shooting ruled justifiable homicide within days, an investigation many of his family considered rushed from the start. 30,000 people attended his funeral in Chicago. The man who wrote the song that became the soundtrack of a movement for racial justice was killed in a motel office before he ever heard it played on the radio. Jim Morrison died July 3, 1971, age 27. Buried at Père Lachaise Cemetery, Paris, France. Light My Fire and the End, the persona that turned the Doors into the most theatrically dangerous band in American rock. He died in a Paris apartment bathtub, officially of heart failure, no autopsy performed at his girlfriend's request. The absence of an official examination feeding decades of theories that refused to resolve. His grave at Père Lachaise became one of the most visited and most vandalized memorials in the cemetery's history, requiring a permanent guard and eventually a barrier. The poet who wanted to break on through to the other side did so in a Paris bathtub with no one, allowed to ask exactly how. Jimi Hendrix died September 18, 1970, age 27, buried at Greenwood Memorial Park, Renton, Washington. Purple Haze and Voodoo Child, the most innovative electric guitar playing in popular music, condensed into a recording career lasting less than 4 years. Found unresponsive in a London hotel room, having taken sleeping pills and choked on his own vomit, the cause of death ruled inhalation of vomit due to barbiturate intoxication. He was buried not in London or New York, but back in Renton, Washington, the working-class Seattle suburb where he grew up, his family unable to afford much more at the time. The most revolutionary instrumentalist of his generation buried in the town he had left as a teenager because there was nowhere else to leave him. John Bonham died September 25, 1980, age 32. Buried at Rushock Parish Church, Worcestershire, England, the drumming on Led Zeppelin's entire catalog, a sound so massive that drum machines decades later were programmed to imitate the room it was recorded in, He drank an estimated 40 shots of vodka over 12 hours at a rehearsal, was put to bed, and was found dead the next afternoon, having choked on his own vomit in his sleep. Led Zeppelin disbanded within months, stating the group could not continue without him, refusing to replace the irreplaceable. The drummer whose sound filled stadiums laid to rest in a country churchyard that holds perhaps 200 graves. Elvis Presley died August 16, 1977, age 42, buried at Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee in the Meditation Garden after his body was moved there following an attempted grave robbery at his original resting place. Heartbreak Hotel and Hound Dog, the most commercially significant figure in recorded music. His decline through the 1970s, playing out in Las Vegas residencies audiences attended to, witnessed the spectacle of decline itself. Found unresponsive on his bathroom floor, the autopsy revealing a cocktail of prescription medications. The official cause listed as cardiac arrhythmia. The man who changed the shape of American music spent his final years dying slowly in a bathroom inn, the house where his grave now draws tour buses. Karen Carpenter died February 4, 1983, age 32, buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Cypress, California. Close to You and Rainy Days and Mondays, one of the purest vocal instruments in pop music history. Her death from cardiac arrest, brought about by complications of anorexia nervosa, made her one of the first widely publicized cases of the illness, a condition the medical establishment had almost no vocabulary for at the time. She had been undergoing treatment and appeared to be recovering, the cardiac damage from years of starvation having already done damage that recovery could not reverse. The voice that sounded like comfort itself, destroyed by an illness the culture around her had no name for. Whitney Houston died February 11, 2012, age 48. Buried at Fairview Cemetery, Westfield, New Jersey, in the same plot as her father. I Will Always Love You, the best-selling single by a female artist in history. Found submerged in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton the night before the Grammy Awards. The autopsy citing drowning with heart disease and cocaine use as contributing factors. Her daughter Bobby Christina would die in nearly identical circumstances 3 years later, found unresponsive in a bathtub, the two deaths separated by 3 years and connected by a repetition too precise for words. The greatest voice of her generation drowning in a hotel bathtub the night before the industry was set to honor her. Aaliyah died August 25, 2001, age 22, buried at Ferncliff Cemetery, Hartsdale, New York. Are You That Somebody and the posthumously released Try Again, the princess of R&B on the verge of a film crossover that suggested a career about to expand. An overloaded Cessna crashed shortly after takeoff from the Bahamas. The pilot uncertified for that aircraft and found with cocaine in his system, the plane 700 pounds over its maximum weight. 22 years old, killed because a small plane carried more weight than it should have, and nobody on the ground said no. Buried at Ferncliff in a solid bronze coffin reportedly costing $50,000. Selena died March 31, 1995, age 23, buried at Seaside Memorial Park, Corpus Christi, Texas. Como LaFleur and the posthumous Dreaming of You, the queen of Tejano music on the verge of an English-language crossover. Shot by Yolanda Saldivar, president of her fan club, after a confrontation over embezzled funds, Selena running toward the lobby for help before collapsing. She was 23. The crossover album was released 2 months later and became the first predominantly Spanish-language album to debut at #1. The singer, who was about to break into the mainstream, did so only after she could no longer perform, her grave visited by hundreds of thousands every year since. Michael Jackson died June 25, 2009, age 50. Buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Glendale, California. Thriller, the best-selling album of all time, the most famous child performer in music history, transformed into the most famous adult performer in the world. His personal physician administered propofol, an anesthetic with no legitimate use for insomnia, in the lead-up to a comeback tour that would never happen. The physician was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and served 2 years. Jackson was 50, the boy who sang "I Want You," back at 11, dying from a drug meant for surgical anesthesia, administered in a bedroom because sleep itself had become something he could not access without intervention. Eazy-E died March 26, 1995, age 30, buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park, Whittier, California. A founding member of NWA and Ruthless Records, the label and group that brought gangster rap out of Compton into the national conversation about race and policing. He was diagnosed with AIDS in February 1995 and died 1 month later, the diagnosis announced only weeks before his death, one of the first prominent figures in hip-hop to die of the disease. The speed between diagnosis and death left almost no time for the conversation his openness might have started. The man who helped invent an entire genre's relationship to mortality died of an illness the genre rarely discussed. Brian Jones died July 3, 1969, age 27, buried at Cheltenham Cemetery, Cheltenham, England. A founding member of the Rolling Stones, his work on sitar and dulcimer gave the band's mid-1960s recordings a texture Jagger and Richards' core could not produce alone. He was fired from the band weeks before his death, his drug use having made him unreliable, the dismissal handled with the cold practicality bands reserve for members already mentally replaced. He was found at the bottom of his swimming pool, the coroner ruling death by misadventure, his heart and liver already severely damaged. The Rolling Stones played a free concert in Hyde Park 2 days later, dedicating it to him, continuing without him exactly as the firing had already arranged. Duane Allman died October 29, 1971, age 24, buried at Rose Hill Cemetery, Macon, Georgia. The slide guitar on Layla and the foundational sound of the Allman Brothers Band, the Southern rock sound that defined a regional musical identity for a decade. He swerved his motorcycle to avoid a truck that had stopped suddenly in front of him in Macon, the bike landing on top of him, thus in surgery hours later from internal injuries. He was 24. His bandmate Barry Oakley would die 13 months later in a motorcycle accident 3 blocks from the same site, struck by a city bus, having reportedly visited Duane's grave often in the months before, never recovering from the loss. Both men rest near each other at Rose Hill. Ronnie Van Zant died October 20, 1977, age 29, buried at Riverside Memory Gardens, Jacksonville, Florida. Sweet Home Alabama and Freebird, the voice of Lynyrd Skynyrd, the band that became the definitive sound of Southern rock at the moment, a chartered plane carrying them ran out of fuel and crashed into a Mississippi swamp. Van Zant and 2 other members, including guitarist Steve Gaines, were killed instantly. The album they had just finished, Street Survivors, was released 3 days before the crash, with cover art depicting the band engulfed in flames, hastily withdrawn afterward. The band that wrote the unofficial anthem of an entire region died in a swamp 3 days after an album cover had, by terrible coincidence, already predicted it. Bon Scott died February 19, 1980, age 33, buried at Fremantle Cemetery, Fremantle, Western Australia. The voice of AC/DC through Highway to Hell, an album title that became one of rock's grimmest accidental prophecies less than 6 months after release. He was found dead in a friend's car in London after a night of heavy drinking, left to sleep it off, choking on his own vomit, the same mechanism that had killed Hendrix and Bonham. AC/DC, like Led Zeppelin, considered disbanding, ultimately replacing Scott and recording Back in Black, dedicated to him, which became one of the best-selling albums in history. The singer who wrote an album called Highway to Hell died on it within the year. Cliff Burton died September 27, 1986, age 24. Buried at Maple Grove Cemetery, Maplewood, Minnesota. The bassist of Metallica, his playing on Master of Puppets bringing a level of musicality to thrash metal the genre had not previously been credited with. The band's tour bus skidded on an icy road in Sweden and overturned, Burton thrown through a window and crushed beneath the bus when it rolled onto him. The other members reportedly drew cards for the bunks that night, Burton having won the bunk at the window. He was 24, 2 albums into a career that had already reshaped what a bass guitar could do inside heavy metal. The card game that decided who slept where decided who lived. Randy Rhoads died March 19, 1982, age 25. Buried at Mountain View Cemetery, San Bernardino, California. The guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne's solo band, his playing on Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley bringing classically informed virtuosity to heavy metal guitar. The tour bus driver, without authorization, took a small plane up for a joyride, with Rhoads and the band's costume designer aboard, buzzing the tour bus repeatedly before clipping it, the plane crashing into a nearby mansion and exploding. Rhoads was 25, 2 albums into a solo career, critics already considered among the most influential guitar work of the decade. The joyride nobody asked for ended the career before its second act could begin. Stevie Ray Vaughan died August 27, 1990, age 35. Buried at Laurel Land Memorial Park, Dallas, Texas. Texas Flood and Pride and Joy. The guitarist who single-handedly revived blues guitar as a commercial genre in the 1980s, having gotten sober after years of addiction and entering what friends called the best period of his life and playing. A helicopter carrying him and members of Eric Clapton's touring crew crashed into a hill in heavy fog after takeoff from a shared concert in Wisconsin, killing everyone aboard. He had been sober for 4 years. The guitarist who survived addiction died in a helicopter that should not have taken off, the recovery itself becoming the cruelest detail. Phil Lynott died January 4, 1986, age 36. Buried at St. Fintan Cemetery, Sutton, Dublin, Ireland. The boys are back in town, the frontman of Thin Lizzy, one of the first major rock bands fronted by a black Irish musician, his songwriting blending hard rock with Irish storytelling tradition. Years of heroin and alcohol abuse led to organ failure, Lynott collapsing at home on Christmas Day and dying 8 days later in hospital, his body unable to recover from the accumulated damage. A statue of him stands on Harry Street in Dublin, the kind of memorial a city only builds for figures it decides, after the fact, that it loved all along. Mac Miller died September 7, 2018, age 26. Buried in an unmarked grave at Homewood Cemetery, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Blue Slide Park, the first independently distributed debut to top the Billboard 200 since 1995, a commercial achievement the music he made afterward increasingly outgrew, his later work earning critical respect the frat rap origins had not initially suggested was coming. He died of an accidental overdose from fentanyl pressed into a counterfeit oxycodone pill, his dealer later convicted. He was 26, in what friends agreed was the most ambitious period of his career. The unmarked grave in his hometown, the city that had watched him grow from a teenager rapping about parties into an artist just beginning to be taken seriously. Shannon Hoon died October 21, 1995, age 28. Buried at Lafayette Cemetery, Lafayette, Indiana. No Rain, the song and video that made Blind Melon's B-Girl one of the most recognizable images of 1990s alternative rock, the band's only major hit, arriving the same year Hoon's addiction had become unmanageable enough for interventions. He was found dead on the band's tour bus in New Orleans of an accidental cocaine overdose. 11 days after the birth of his daughter, whom he had only recently met. The B-Girl video was still in rotation when its songwriter died on a bus in Louisiana. A newborn daughter back home who would grow up with only the video as a way to see her father move. Florence Ballard died February 22, 1976, age 32. Buried at Detroit Memorial Park East, Warren, Michigan. The original lead singer of the Supremes, Her voice, the group's defining sound before Motown founder Berry Gordy restructured the group around Diana Ross and fired her in 1967. Her lawsuit against Motown was settled for a fraction of what she was owed, and she spent her final years on welfare in Detroit, living within driving distance of the studio that had built its empire partly on her voice. She died of a coronary thrombosis at 32 while receiving public assistance. The woman who co-founded one of the best-selling girl groups in history, dying on welfare in the same city as the label that no longer needed her. Tammy Wynette died April 6, 1998, age 55, buried at Woodlawn Memorial Park, Nashville, Tennessee. Stand By Your Man, the song that made her the first lady of country music, and also the song she spent decades being asked to explain, depending on the politics of whoever was asking. She underwent more than 24 surgeries over her lifetime, developing a dependency on prescription painkillers she battled for years. She died in her sleep at home of a blood clot. The medical examiner's report, complicated by the volume of medications in her system, though no cause beyond the clot was ever assigned. The woman whose signature song became a cultural flashpoint, dying quietly in the city that made her famous for a song she recorded in 15 minutes. Dimebag Darrell died December 8, 2004, age 38, buried at Moody Gardens Mausoleum, Galveston, Texas, in a crypt designed to resemble a Marshall guitar amplifier with a custom guitar interred alongside him. The guitarist of Pantera, his riffs on cowboys, from Hell and Vulgar display of Burr Power, having a reshaped heavy metal's relationship to groove and aggression simultaneously. He was shot multiple times on stage during a performance with his new band by a man with an apparent grudge against his former band, the gunman also killing 3 others before being shot by police. He was 38, performing the thing he had done his entire adult life, killed in the middle of doing it by someone in the crowd. They wrote the songs, they are in the ground. The records keep playing in cars and headphones, belonging to people who were never alive to hear them the first time, the music outliving every one of the rooms it was first played in.